So I'll introduce, Professor, the Alex Tan, from the University of Canterbury, and he's the expert on the East Asian affairs, and then, from the comparative and then international perspective. And then we will listen to his lecture on the, his take on, the North Korea and then Russia rapprochement, and then especially from the Taiwanese and the, Chinese perspective, and then plus, Oceania. Thank you, please.
Yep. All right. Thank you again, Wu Yil, for the invitation to be able to share my views with regards to the recent events that's happening in the Korean Peninsula, the North Korea and Russia arms cooperation, and specifically the Mutual Defense Pact. I want to share a little bit on my view about this issue. My opinion is that the strengthening of this relationship actually is very, very concerning. Not only for the Northeast Asia region, but I would say there are flow-on effects that goes all the way to Southeast Asia, that goes all the way to Oceania. Of course, there are differential perceptions with regards to the risk and the threat. But let me explain this a little bit in my presentation today. The top concern to me is the expansive military relationship that can strengthen North Korea's military. And as we know, this is a defense pact that is being signed essentially now by two rogue states and two pariah states, okay, Russia and North Korea. The North Korean regime is, in my view, an agent of chaos. And now the relationship with Russia has just essentially multiplied, with another agent of chaos as well. So you have two agents of chaos coming together. This is exponential, in my view, as far as its ability to disrupt. These two rogue states, in my view, and why I'm saying that this is an exponential issue with regards to disruption, possible disruption anyway, is because these two states have very little to lose. Okay? They are not as engaged in a way in the international economic, global economic system, so to speak. And they have a lesser stake in this current international system that we have benefited from. So the relationship, to me, has the potential to be a great disruptor for the Asia-Pacific region and can raise, in my view, the likelihood of conflict, certainly in the immediate neighborhood of Northeast Asia, but it can go further than that, okay, because there are flow-on effects with regards to that. So my view is that when you think of how this impact, and let me explain a little bit what I meant by the possibility of the problems I see in this expansive relationship and the flow-on effect of this. If you look at the impact of this, in my view, the Mutual Defense Pact between Russia and North Korea is worrisome and potentially destabilizing in our region, because our region right now, in my view, is just balanced at the needle point. Okay? Very, very prickly balance, very careful balance right now. If you see what's happening in the region with the intensification of the United States-China strategic competition, what's happening in the South China Sea with China and the Philippines right now, what's happening around the Taiwan Strait, we are really in a needle point balance, so to speak. The implications and impact of this Russian-North Korean pact on the greater Asia-Pacific, in my view, varies by the geostrategic location of these countries in the region, the maritime nature of Asia-Pacific's geography, and the proximity to North Korea and Russia affect the threat and risk perception of the different countries that make up the Asia-Pacific. So if you think of this first factor, geographical proximity. So the closer a country is to North Korea and Russia, the higher the threat and risk perception they can feel from this defense pact. So And then the second factor that I'm trying to propose here is the idea of what kind of territory do these countries have? So on territorial geography, continental states, contiguous states are more likely to perceive a higher threat and risk level posed by the Russia-North Korea Defense Pact than the maritime, archipelagic, or littoral states of the Asia-Pacific. Of course, there are exceptions, but in general, these two factors, in my view, can help us understand the variation in how the different countries in the region view this defense pact. The most obvious threat, for example, is to South Korea, of course, right? And if you look at those two factors that I just mentioned, proximity, South Korea is closest to both Russia and North Korea. It's a contiguous state, right? So it's connected. So therefore, the level of risk from the South Korean perspective will necessarily be higher. China, in my view, must also be quite irritated by this defense pact, as it has more to lose globally than the two pariah states of Russia and North Korea. So North Korea, if we think of back in the Cold War days, seems to be going back to its Cold War arbitrage games, right? Of likely playing China versus Russia against each other to gain the maximum benefit that it can have for itself. So while the world seems to say that, this must be, it must be good for China, because these are the three states that want to change. I've seen some news report that says that these are states that wanted to change the international order. I'm not necessarily in agreement with that, because in my view, China has more to lose, with a great disruption of the international system, so to speak, because China's growth and development in the last 30, 40 years definitely benefited from the international system. But these other two, not necessarily so. So, in my opinion, China will have an elevated threat and risk perception from this defense pact. If you think, again, of my two factors, closeness and connectedness, right? So, continental state and closeness. So, this, in my view, is contrary to the general opinion that the pact ties countries that are wanting to change the international system and order, as some observers are claiming. It is important to emphasize that China has more to lose than these other two rogue states, in my view. Japan will have a heightened sense of threat and risk due to the proximity from both North Korea and Russia. Okay, Taiwan, based on the above two factors of geography and proximity, will have a slightly lower threat and risk perception because it's slightly farther when compared to Japan, for example. But and I don't think Taiwan and is a natural, quote unquote, a natural adversary of North Korea or a natural adversary of Russia itself. But I think the true impact of the Russia-North Korea defense pact on Taiwan is not the direct threat that these two countries can pose on Taiwan itself. Okay. Instead, my view is that the problem for Taiwan is that the potential of pulling away the world's attention on the Taiwan problem. So, because if you notice that since COVID time, the pandemic heightened the concern for supply chain security. Okay, so in a way, Taiwan got all the attention in the world, and all of a sudden, Chinese airplanes and Chinese naval ships going around Taiwan. Since 2020, the reporting became more obvious. But in all honesty, the airplanes have been flying around Taiwan since 2016. But it's 2020 that made it kind of like highlighted the whole issue. But now, with the Russia and North Korea defense pact, the attention seems to shift away from the Taiwan issue. Kind of bad news for Taiwan, because the Chinese ships and the Chinese military is still quite active. But if you would notice, there is lesser attention on the Taiwan news these days. In fact, recently, the Chinese Coast Guard has been giving Taiwanese fishermen problem in Kinmen. And yet, you do not hear the world talking a lot about it. Because now we have a new problem. The world is a new problem. And this is a big, big problem because it's the North Korea, Russia defense pact goes beyond our region. It has impact on the Ukraine war in Europe, right? So very interesting thing that is happening. In the Oceania region where I am, direct threat and risk perception, in my view, is relatively lower due to the distance and the geographic nature of the region, okay? Oceania do not see Russia and North Korea as direct threat as such to its security, but the threats are more indirect, okay? In the form of being a threat to the larger region that can impact on Oceania's a sense of peace, security, and stability. And of course, if any disruption of that peace, security, and stability in the Northeast Asia region, in the Southeast Asia region, the flow-on effect to us is that it threatens our economic security as such. Okay, so I would say that I propose in my this very, very short lecture is that it is important for us to understand that, firstly, not to forget that the implication of this great disruption, a possible great disruptor, not only to the immediate region of Northeast Asia, but Southeast Asia and to Oceania. But the level of threat and the level of risk that is viewed varies from how close you are to North Korea and Russia, and what kind of state you are actually in. So that is my way of thinking about it. But we have to be very, very careful how this plays on forward, especially just a quick note on what is happening in the United States, particularly come first Tuesday of November, right? It could intensify that disruption, in my view. So it's kind of like a X1 times X2 coming together, and it could just implode. So we have to be very, very careful, something that we have to watch on and hold vigilantly if we are to ensure peace, security, and stability in the Asia Pacific.
Okay. Thank you so much for your great short but very meaningful lecture. And I have a few questions on this, and you discuss about the possible great disruption and at the same time based upon the closeness and then connectedness in the especially East Asian countries. And then China is a really big factor for everything. China's is irritated by this Russia and North Korea Russia rapprochement and the military so-called the nuclear treaty, we can say. And China will move and then react will something and then to this the change of security structure in East Asia, in the Indo-Pacific, and then which you just said related to intertwined with Euro-Atlantic region, especially in Ukraine-Russia war. So what will be the China's next move for this particular, or no move?
Yeah, I think, honestly, I think China is being pushed now to have a move. Because at the moment, when China is not really, quote unquote, hands off on the Ukraine issue, supporting Russia, but this action that North Korea and Putin did is quite disconcerting for China, because now China is a bit trapped, in my view. It is trapped because if you think of the two choices that China can make, as you were talking about, to move or not to move, right? No move is bad news. because they will, in effect, these two countries will start dragging China.
Mm.
You know, I read in BBC when Putin visited Beijing that the BBC titled it as "This is no longer an equal relationship," right? That China is much stronger than Russia. Well, now that North Korea and Putin just got together, essentially there is a potential that the tail can wag the dog.
Yeah, it's more leverage, right?
It's much more leverage, and because and remember I mentioned Russia and North Korea has lesser to lose. China has more to lose, right? So the next move really is on China, but China, in my view, put itself in a trap. Right? It dug a hole to itself because it did not say anything when the beginning of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So right now, what can it do? You know, it's so in my view, it is a flow-on effect. I think China never calculated that this will happen.
Okay, I agree.
This is a variable that was this error term in their equation that was unpredictable, and they did not model it. So now that it came in, they're kind of like, what do we do? Damn if you do, damn if you don't, kind of like that.
So I mean, this is a I mostly agree with what you are saying, and then China is in the trap, very difficult position, and then I don't think China would expect these two countries, say law country and pariah country, authoritarian regimes, to collaborate at this level,
Yes.
And Russian-Ukraine war happened, and then Russia need weapons, and then North Korea actually provide the weapons, and then it's pretty good, Russia probably one-shot game, let's get the weapons, and then we'll forget about North Korea. But I think it's Russia is trying to, is getting to know that the North Korea is pretty useful, for the leverage for the United States and North Korea, South Korea, and then Japan at the same time. Over China.
Yes. Well, so in a way, Uyil, I totally agree with you on that point. This is a way that Russia can poke on the Indo-Pacific side, right? So it's a way to create, as I said, disruption in the Indo-Pacific side, and the flow-on effect is to me quite worrisome because it is we are in a situation right now wherein countries in the Indo-Pacific are also concerned about what's happening in the United States. They're concerned of the hegemon's attention in the region, which is, as we will know, it has been quite in and out, in and out. The attention sometimes is in, sometimes is out, and as a result, Japan and South Korea, these middle powers, have been extending a lot of its, in other words, I would say burden sharing, burden shifting, what have you, getting involved in the maintenance of the rules-based international system in our region. So South Korea recently has also published its Indo-Pacific strategy, and certainly starting to get more involved in the South China Sea issue as well, or at least to maintain Coast Guard presence and what have you, military exercises and what have you. Japan is the same thing. But now, with Russia and North Korea signing this pact together, which is an upgrade from whatever they had before, means my fear is that does that mean that South Korea and Japan kind of step back a little bit from the quote-unquote burden shifting that they've been doing in the region to maintain Indo-Pacific regional international order, right?
Okay.
So because now they have to concentrate on what's happening back home and the threat immediately back home, right? So that's the danger. So when there is no Russia-North Korea pact, South Korea and Japan can confidently move further. Help out Philippines, maybe help out South China Sea, help out the United States' role in keeping up the peace.
Right.
Collaborating with Australia, collaborating with with India, but this brings back the attention of South Korea and Japan back to their homeland.
Sure, sure. Yeah, and we are expecting to see, NATO AP4 meeting next week in the Washington D.C. But I think it's going to be pretty interesting, event, for evaluating what we are just, discussing on this issue. And then my, last question, is a nuclear engine. And then, Russia and North Korea, this, defense, treaty actually covers strategic issues. Strategic issues translated into those, sharing, nuclear, armament and delivery system, and then meaning that, North Korea nuclearization is officially endorsed by, Russia Federation. And then Putin, what's your take?
They don't want to be dragged into a nuclear war if, just because. Then it forces the Americans to play that game of, well, should we provide a nuclear guarantee, right, to all of the countries and their allies in the region, right? So for proliferating nuclear weapons in the region, whether South Korea moves to that next step is an issue that the Korean people and the Korean government would have to deliberate. But I can understand why, because their fear, again, in my view, is a lot of moving parts. Number one, direct threat from North Korea, added now geometrically, exponentially exacerbated by Russia's support. And then it's not helped by the fact that the hegemon's attention is not guaranteed, right? So in a way, this is South Korea telling the world that, you know what, we'll take care of our own defense.
Yeah, well, I think this is a pretty spicy topic to discuss for the hours. And then as you say the first part of your lecture, and then Donald Trump might coming back, and then that's going to make this situation even more spicy and more spicier right now.
I think it becomes more unpredictable.
Yeah, so unpredictable. But I think it's at the end of this year or early next year, we will see very, very different structural change. I mean the security structure in the Indo-Pacific and Northeast Asia, which is
related to the
Euro-Atlantic region. And then we have other the presenters in this program too. NSL Lim Pajong, she actually concerned about far right, the growing in the French Parliament.
Europe.
Yeah, Europe. Yeah. You know much about Europe too. So this type of thing is it's going to be pretty.
It's really it's exponential. What we're seeing, it's not these factors that we're naming right now. What's happening in the US, what's happening in Europe. It's not just adding, I don't think. It is really multiplying. It's and it's a bit worrisome that way. So, and I think for our region, though, it is important that the countries, the middle powers in these countries take more, do more things, But one thing that our Asia Pacific and Indo Pacific definitely have to work on is, despite our cultural difference and geographic differences, and because of the nature of our maritime geography and what have you, we still have to really work hard at coming up with a proper security framework.
Yeah, I think it's Asia and then Oceania, especially New Zealand and Australia, South Korea, Japan, and other say liberal democracies, and even partly China too, can cooperate with each other, and then to promote this time of peace, not the provoking and then creating time of war, right now.
If we cannot create a proper framework, we should at least design guardrails. We should at minimum guardrails.
Thank you, Alex. It's great to have you.
Thank you, Will.
And then
thank you. No, it's good.
We don't quite a bit, and then it's good.